Hi, boys and girls. Last time that we read the Parker Inheritance, Candace and Brandon had just gotten off the phone with William Maynard after he hung up because he was pretty upset that Candace and Brandon had the letter still, and he wanted them to leave the past in the past. So that's where I am going to start up again. Neither of them spoke for a few minutes. Candace was playing catch up with everything Maynard had said. Brandon just stared at the dark screen. "He's a racist coward," Brandon finally said. "A bully. It's not fair. He doesn't care about the city. All he wants to do is protect his name." Candace hesitated, then placed her hand on his back. "It's okay. We don't need him." "Well, aren't you mad?" he asked. "Of course I am," she said. "I'm still trying to sort through everything in my head, trying to figure out what to do next." Sniffing, Brandon wiped his nose on the back of his hand. "He's right. No one will ever believe us." "We can prove that James Parker is really Reggie Bradley." "So what? Who'll even care?" He stood up quickly, tipping over his chair. "We should go to the library. I need more sports books. We have to figure out the rest of the code." "Brandon, we can wait. I saw Milo." "No, we can't. You're leaving, remember? Returning to your fancy life in Atlanta." Candace slowly stood up. "Don't be mad at me. I didn't ask to go back home." "But you want to go, right?" She didn't know how to respond, so she just kept her mouth shut. "Come on," he said, already leaving the room. "I'll meet you out front." Candace returned home. After she used the bathroom and told her mom where she was going, she pulled her bike from the shed and wheeled it to the front of the house. Across the street, Milo and 3 of his friends had surrounded Brandon. The boys were yelling at him while Brandon stood still, his arms crossed against his chest. Candace dropped her bike and ran over. "What's going on?" "Oh, Brandon, look, it's your girlfriend," Milo said. "Or is she the boy and you're the girl?" "Shut up." Then Brandon looked at Candace. "Go home. I can handle this." "Just leave him alone," Candace said. If she stuck around, maybe they wouldn't beat him up. "Oh, so she is the boy, isn't she?" Milo grinned. Then he called Brandon one of those dirty, horrible, vile names that had been scrawled into the vandalized yearbook. The other boys laughed. Brandon narrowed his gaze on Milo, knuckled his hands, and stood taller. "Speaking of girlfriends, is Deacon Hawks still seeing your mom? Does your dad still go to therapy because of it?" Everyone fell silent. "Shut up," Milo said. His voice sounded small and shrill. "Is that what your dad said to your mom when he caught them together?" Brandon continued. "Do you think it's possible you're actually Deacon Hawks' son?" "At least my parents are still together," Milo said. "I know," Brandon said. "Some women are just too weak to live on their own." Candace didn't know who was talking, but it wasn't her Brandon. It was someone too cruel and too cold to be her friend. Milo cocked his arm back in slow motion. Brandon easily leaned away from the wild swing. And then, while Milo was caught off balance, Brandon crushed his fist into Milo's stomach. "Brandon, no!" Candace yelled. Brandon turned to Candace. He stared at her like he was seeing her for the first time. Because he was looking at her, he didn't see Milo swing until it was too late. Milo's fist exploded against Brandon's face. He fell, his arms billowing out. His back and head bounced against the sidewalk with a loud crack. "Brandon!" Candace yelled, pushing past the boys. He wasn't moving. Oh, God, he wasn't moving. "Are you okay?" she asked. "Oh, please be okay." Brandon's body had flattened out on the sidewalk. His eyes were closed, and his cheek was already turning puffy from where Milo had hit him. 1, 2, 1,000 seconds later, Brandon groaned. Candace decided this was a good thing. She looked up. Milo and one of the boys had taken off down the street, their bikes wobbling underneath them. The other 2 stood nervously nearby. "Go get my mom," she said to them. When they didn't move, she screamed, "Go! Now!" The boys dropped their bikes and ran to her house. Chapter 38. Brandon was trying to sit up when the boys returned with Candace's mom. "Oh my God, Brandon!" she cried, her phone in her hands. "I'm okay," he mumbled. Blood dripped from his nose. "Help me up, though." "Are you kidding?" Candace said, pushing him back to the ground. "You are unconscious. You probably have a concussion." Her mother knelt beside him. "Yes, I'm with him now," she said into the phone. "He looks okay." After a pause, she said, No, he doesn't need an ambulance. We can take him. She hung up. That was your mother, she said to Brandon. She wants us to take you to the emergency room, and she'll meet us there. She placed her hand against his forehead. Then she pointed to the boys on the other side of the street. Do you know who these two are? Where they live? I'm sure Brandon's mom will have questions. Candace shook her head. I know them, Brandon said. Boys, come here, her mother demanded. They quickly crossed the street. I want you to go straight home. You need to think about what happened here today. Do not try to get together and change your story. Lying will only make things worse. The boys nodded. There were 2 others, Candace whispered. Milo and another boy. 4 boys against 1? Candace's mother slowly flexed her fingers. Go now, she said to Milo's friends. They left, and her mother turned her attention back to Brandon. Hang tight, kiddo. I'll be back in a second. Candace, you stay here while I grab the car. Candace covered his face with his hands. Brandon covered his face with his hands. Candace thought it was because he was trying to block the sun. But then she saw the tears rolling down his cheeks. Candace didn't know what to do, so she took his other hand. Candace didn't cry on the way to the hospital. She even held it together as they entered the brightly lit building, with Brandon squeezing her hand so tightly she was sure that she was going to have bruises. Then Brandon's mother rushed in, her face streaked with tears, and Candace could feel the pressure building behind her eyes. But when they put him in a wheelchair, Candace's chest heaved, and finally a sob after sob began to break through. Oh, my dear Candace, her mother pulled her into an embrace. It's just a precaution. After they had wheeled Brandon off behind the white security doors, Candace's mother led her to a quiet corner in the lobby. What happened out there? Something tells me this has been going on for a while. Candace told her mother how Milo and his friends bullied Brandon at school, and how it had continued during the summer. Then she started to explain what happened that day, but froze at the part between Brandon's and Milo's punches, the part where she had yelled out Brandon's name. It's all my fault, Candace mumbled. Her mouth had gone all coppery, and she couldn't breathe. It felt like she had been the one hit in the stomach. Her mother frowned. I don't understand. She grabbed her mom's hand. I yelled at Brandon to stop. Then he looked at me, and that's when Milo hit him. And he fell, and there was the sound of his body and his head hitting the concrete, and... Stop right now, her mother said. You are most certainly not to blame for this. Candace let her mother hug her. She knew she was acting like a baby, but she didn't care. I'm sorry about all of this, she said. I know you're on a deadline. Candace, you are more important than any deadline in this world. She soothed her daughter's hair. Let's find the cafeteria. I think it's a good time for a mom and daughter lunch. Chapter 39. Brandon's doctor suspected that he had a concussion, though she wasn't completely sure. If anything, Brandon received it when his head hit the sidewalk, not when Milo punched him. But Candace was sure Milo would say the opposite when school started. She went to visit Brandon at home the following day. Hey, Candace, Miss Jones said as Candace crossed the street. She sat on the porch, flipping through a magazine. Go on up, but he needs his rest, so don't stay too long, okay? Yes, ma'am, I understand. She put her hands on the door handle and let it linger there. Mom told me this morning that y'all aren't going to press charges? She nodded. Millie and I had a very long, very frank conversation yesterday, and I made it abundantly clear what steps I will take if this bullying continues. Miss Jones closed her magazine. But Milo wasn't the only one in the wrong here. Brandon told me what he said about Milo's mother. Candace let her hand fall from the door handle. If you hadn't guessed, Brandon's outbursts of late haven't been just about Milo. His mother continued. It's been a really hard summer for him, and it's got even tougher when he found out that you were leaving. Candace looked at her, then back at the door. What was she supposed to say? Go on up, she said, and Candace, thank you for being a good friend. Candace entered the house and took the stairs to Brandon's room. His door was already cracked open, so she softly knocked and stepped into the room. The lights were off and the curtains were drawn shut. All she could see of Brandon was a lump underneath the sheets. Please tell me you brought something to read, he said. Anything, really. Beggars can't be choosers. Sorry, Mom wouldn't let me bring any books over. She looked around, trying to find somewhere suitable to sit. She'd never been in a boy's room before. She'd expected it to smell, well, like a boy, but Brandon's room smelled like cinnamon and new books, which fit him perfectly, she had to admit. It was a way better scent than her father's citrus cologne. "How much longer do you have to stay in bed?" she asked. "I should be okay tomorrow. They want to make sure I don't have any lingering effects." He sat up and kicked off the sheet. Candace was glad that he was wearing a t-shirt and shorts and not pajamas. That would have made things weird. "You should lie back down." "No, really, it's okay. I feel a lot better." Once he was sitting up, Candace figured it was all right for her to sit on the edge of the bed. "What's this about you not wanting to press charges?" she asked. "I can't turn Milo into the police. He's just a kid. And so are you. And he hit you. And you fell, and your head smashed against the concrete, and—" She shook her head. She was not about to cry again. "Milo's just going to keep being a bully unless you do something. Mom and I talked about it. I'm going to take self-defense classes. Not because I want to fight him, but Mom thinks it'll help with my confidence, I guess. And maybe I'll meet some new friends." He drew his right leg underneath the bed. "What am I going to do once you leave, anyways?" Candace poked at the hole in her jeans. It had grown so large over the last couple weeks, there was no way she'd be able to wear these jeans to school come August. "I talked to my mom, too. We'll be here for another week, until next Friday." 9 days? "Yeah, 9 days. It wasn't a lot, but it was better than the alternative." He slapped his hands together. "We've got to get to work if we're going to find Parker's fortune before you leave. I've got an idea." "That's not why I'm staying," she said. "Well, it's not the only reason." Her eyes had finally adjusted to the dark so she could see Brandon's face. "You're my friend. Like a real friend. And I don't want this summer to end just yet." "Well, you're my friend too. And like my only friend right now. Because Quincy's gone?" He nodded. Candace slid closer to Brandon. "Do you want to tell me about him?" And that's where I'm going to stop for now. And I want to know if you think that Brandon and his mom are doing the right thing by not pressing charges against Milo.